Something's loading. Okay, it looks like we're live.
Yeah, we're live.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, we're on. There we go.
All right.
Okay, sorry about those technical difficulties. It looks like we have managed to get on, so apologies that we're starting a little bit late, but we will get moving. My name is Mitch Harwood from SW Brokerage. I'm here with...
Hi, everyone. I'm Nathan Anderson from Property Perspective Queensland, buyers agents. Nice to meet you, and thanks for spending time with us tonight.
Yeah, thank you very much. I will just jump straight into it since obviously we started a little bit late. So, we're here to talk about the first home buyer blueprint and buying your first home. So we'll start with me giving a bit of a presentation from the finance side, and then Nathan will give a presentation from a buyer's agent side and give you a bit of insight into how a buyer's agent can help you. And then we'll have a bit of time for questions. So look, we understand that applying for a loan or embarking on a new financial journey can be daunting. So to help you understand the process and know what's coming next, we've developed our SWB Way, which is a detailed breakdown of the process and of how we structure our ongoing relationship. So I'll just start by giving you a bit of an introduction to the lending environment, which are probably going to cover some words that you've heard before, but may not know exactly what they mean. So what is a deposit? How much do you need? Is 5% enough? Is 2% enough? And what about purchase costs? So when people talk about a deposit, that is essentially the percentage of the property value that you've saved up. So if you're buying a property for $1 million, a 5% deposit would be 5% of $1 million, so $50,000. However, you need to also cover the purchase costs with that. So if you are buying a property for $1 million and you need to pay $40,000 in stamp duty and $10,000 in other fees, then you need to save your 5% plus the amount that you are going to spend on purchase costs. So the amount that you need will depend on your specific circumstances, but that's what you're looking at. But when you hear, a bank wants a 20% deposit, they want you to have that percentage of the purchase price plus an amount for costs. So what is lender's mortgage insurance and should you pay it? Lender's mortgage insurance is a type of insurance that banks get you to pay for if you have less than a 20% deposit. So generally banks want you to have a 20% deposit, and if you have less than that, they can sometimes still lend to you, but you're considered a bit higher risk. So you're required to pay this insurance that covers the bank if something were to go wrong and they can't recover the money from you that they need. Sometimes it's okay to pay lender's mortgage insurance, but I'll be taking you through a few government schemes and a few other ways to potentially get a loan without having to pay that insurance, even if you have less than a 20% deposit. So next, what is a guarantee or a family pledge? As we've said, a 20% deposit is ideal, but if you don't have that 20% deposit, there are ways to get around it and have you get a bank treat you like you did have 20%. So let's say you're buying a property for $1 million. The bank wants you to only borrow up to 80% of that, so a maximum borrowing of $800,000. However, if you have a family member who perhaps owns a property, say also worth $1 million, but they bought it quite a while ago and they only owe $200,000, the bank can use their property as what we call a secondary security. So they gain a little bit of rights over the title to that property, which just gives them a bit more security in the loan. So that way you're not considered high risk anymore as if you had under a 20% deposit. So if you've got a family member who can help you out with that, that can potentially help you get into the market a lot quicker. So what are genuine savings? Now, most applications with less than a 20% deposit require you to have a certain amount of genuine savings between 2 and 5%. Essentially, that means savings that you've had yourself from money that you've earned. So anything that you've earned through earnings, a bonus that you got paid from work, money that you earned by selling shares or an asset is considered genuine savings. Generally, a gift that you receive from the family member would not be considered genuine savings. So depending on the type of product you get, you may need to consider, do you have genuine savings enough to qualify for that product? A few other things that you should know. How will interest rates impact your borrowing power? So as a lot of you probably know, towards the end of last year, interest rates were consistently going down. And then at the start of this year, they've consistently come back up. And we're sitting pretty much about where we were a year ago. We're hoping that they continue to come down as the year goes on. But essentially, as interest rates go up, the minimum repayments you need to make for a loan go up, which means the amount that you can borrow goes down in general. And then the opposite. If interest rates go down, your borrowing power will potentially go up. So we are hoping that as the year goes on, interest rates continue to come down and your borrowing power will be more unlocked. What do banks look for in loan applicants? So we have a thing we call, or essentially the three main things that banks look at are the purpose, the servicing, and the security. So one, loan purpose. What's the loan for? If you want to get a home loan to buy a house for you to live in or to buy an investment property, a home loan is an appropriate product. If you want to get a home loan because you want to start a business, that's not going to fly because the purpose doesn't suit that product. You'd want to look at business lending. Second is servicing. So that's, can you actually afford to repay the loan? So the bank will look at what money you have coming in, what money you have going out in terms of your expenses and other debts you might have, and then how much it looks like you're going to have to pay for the loan you're applying for. And if in their calculations, they think that you've got enough money coming in to cover all of your existing debts and expenses, as well as this new loan, then the loan services and you should be good to go. Now, the third thing is security. So as we talked about before, security is what the bank has rights over if something were to go wrong. So when you buy a home and you get a home loan, the bank has rights over that home that you buy. So they will take out what we call a mortgage. A lot of people say mortgage as if it's interchangeable with home loan, but it is actually slightly different. The bank gets a mortgage over your home, which means they have particular rights over your home. So if you're unable to pay, they may be able to potentially repossess your home and sell it if they have to. Now, there's a lot of steps before we get to there, but that's essentially what it means. The banks have rights over your property. As we said, with a family guarantee, the bank might not just get rights over your home, but if you have a family member giving you a guarantee, they can potentially get limited rights over another piece of security. So those are the three things. If you have an appropriate purpose, if you have sufficient security, and if you can service the loan, you should qualify for it. Why should you use a broker? Now, if you walk into a bank and say, hey, what can you offer me? They might have one or two products that they're able to offer you, but they have one calculator saying how much they think you can borrow, and they have a couple of products which they'll give you potentially their best rate, potentially not, and it's a take it or leave it kind of situation. If you use a broker, brokers have access to over 40 lenders, so can look at all different types of lenders, all different rates that might be available to you, and also different ways of calculating things, because different lenders calculate your income very differently. For example, some lenders, if you earn a lot of overtime, will take 100% of that overtime because they say, hey, you've earned it, we want to count it. Whereas other lenders will say, well, overtime isn't guaranteed, so we're only going to take 70% of that. So if you're in a job that earns potentially a lot of overtime, a lot of allowances, bonuses, commissions, certain banks will use 100% and other banks will only use 70%. So the amount that you can borrow between banks is so different. And speaking to a broker, we know the bank policies and we have all of their calculators. So instead of going to 20 different banks and seeing individually what they can offer you, you can go to one person, we do the hard work for you, and we try and find a product that is going to best suit your needs. As well as that, we're just here to guide you through the process. If you speak to someone at a bank, if you have any questions, you want to call someone, wait on a wait line on the phone while someone gets to you. If you come with us, you got my personal phone number, you got my personal email, can answer questions whenever you need. What other things should you know when making an offer? So when you do make an offer to buy a property, there's a few different things that you want to keep in mind. So one is the finance clause. Not all states use finance clauses, but in Queensland, it is very standard to use a finance clause. Essentially, you can put a clause in the contract saying, hey, I want to buy this house, but you need to give me 7 to 14 days for the bank to confirm that they're definitely happy to lend me the money. And if I can't get that in time, then I can pull out of the contract. So it just gives you a bit of protection in case, for whatever reason, the bank doesn't think it's appropriate for you to buy the house. There's a building and pest inspection clause. So you can say, hey, you need to give me, again, 7 to 14 days to send someone in to inspect this house, apartment, property, and make sure that there's no structural issues with the building, to make sure it doesn't have a termite infestation. And that gives you rights. If you do send someone in and you get a report that's unsatisfactory, it gives you rights to pull out of the contract without losing your deposit. Deposit clauses just cover how much of a deposit you're going to provide. And then the settlement date is just how long after the contract you're going to settle. In Queensland, standard settlement date is 30 days. So those are just a few things to keep in mind. But if we set up a meeting and have a chat, we can go through what individually might be best for your circumstances. So now I'm going to cover what incentives are available for first home buyers in Australia. So we have a number of incentives to help first home buyers get into the property market. I've got a summary of them on screen. I'm not going to go through them all on this screen because I'm just about to take you through them. But the one I will cover now, which I won't go into more detail on later, is the First Home Super Saver Scheme. So if you make voluntary superannuation contributions, this scheme allows you to withdraw some of those to put towards a deposit on your first home. Now, this is only for voluntary contributions. So that doesn't include anything that your employer has paid. But if you salary sacrifice to make extra contributions, like I know a lot of government workers do, or if you've just chosen to make additional contributions yourself, you can potentially pull out up to $50,000 of those and use them towards a first home purchase. This is another one of those things where we'd want to have a meeting and look at your circumstances and see if that's going to be the best option for you. But that's definitely a potentially really good scheme. So the first proper scheme I'll cover is the Australian Government 5% Deposit Scheme. So as we said before, you've probably heard you need a 20% deposit to buy a property. Otherwise, you can get stuck paying expensive lender's mortgage insurance, and banks actually charge you higher interest rates if you don't have a 20% deposit as well. So this scheme lets you get in and not have to pay that extra insurance and not have to pay higher rates. It's really popular, and it's currently actually going through a few changes, so make sure you speak to us. In terms of the criteria, we'll just run through a few of the basic ones first. So you have to be buying as an individual or as two applicants. So you can be a couple, it can be a family member, it can be a friend, but it's a maximum of 2 people. You must be planning to live in the property yourself. So you can't buy an investment property under this scheme. You can potentially later turn it into an investment property, but there are a few things to consider if you're doing that. You can buy an existing house, townhouse, or apartment, a house and land package, or an off-the-plan apartment or townhouse. If you're going to construct, you have to enter a fixed price contract with a licensed registered builder and begin construction within 12 months and move in within 24 months. So construction is definitely something you can do here, but you have to have your land and build contracts ready to go together. Under this scheme, you can't buy land and then later work out the build. It all has to be done in one application. So all applicants must be first home buyers or have not owned any property in Australia for the last 10 years. All applicants must be Australian citizens or permanent residents and be at least 18 years of age. So for Queensland, the purchase price has to be below $1 million for metropolitan areas. So generally that's Sunshine Coast, Gold Coast, Brisbane. And then below $700,000 for anywhere else in Queensland. There is actually a postcode tool that you can Google that will tell you exactly what the cap is for your postcode that you're interested in. Now, the next scheme is very similar. Actually, I should say, if you've got any questions about that, stick them in the chat because at the end of my section, I'll answer a couple of questions. So yeah, feel free to stick any questions in the chat and we'll have a look at them when we get to it. So the next scheme is the Australian Government Help to Buy scheme, which is somewhat similar to the 5% deposit scheme. However, this involves the Australian government actually buying a portion of the property. So you only need to borrow enough to pay for your portion of the property, and you can buy with as little as a 2% deposit as opposed to a 5% deposit. Now, you eventually have to pay the government back, either when you're earning enough money to cover more of the debt, you can buy their portion off them in chunks, or when you sell the property, they will take their portion back. So again, just a quick rundown of the criteria. You have to be buying as an individual or 2 applicants, can't be more than 2. Again, must be planning to live in the property yourself, so no investment properties. You can buy an existing house, townhouse or apartment, house and land package, off the plan apartment or townhouse. And as I said earlier, for construction, the same criteria applies. You need to have everything ready to go together. Now, for this scheme, there is an income limit of $103,000 for individuals or $165,000 for couples. The 5% deposit scheme used to have a similar maximum income, but the 5% deposit scheme no longer has that. Just the Help to Buy scheme has that. So it's a bit stricter in terms of this scheme. All applicants also must be Australian citizens. So permanent residents cannot use the Help to Buy scheme. permanent residents are eligible for the 5% deposit scheme. So that's a bit of a key difference between them as well. The property price caps are the same, and the government can buy up to 30% of the property for existing properties, or up to 40% of the properties if they're brand new or if you're building it yourself. Now, obviously, a drawback to this is that you eventually do have to pay the money back. So you need to keep that in mind. However, I've used this scheme for a number of clients, and it has let them get into properties that they would absolutely not have been able to afford on their own. And they've made a plan for the future to eventually buy their portion back. The next scheme that we'll go over is the first home buyer stamp duty concession. Now, this is going to be focused on Queensland. Most states do have their own concession, but the criteria are all different. So the ones that I'm breaking down now are for Queensland. But if you are outside Queensland and want to have a chat with me, we can go over any of the other states as well. So what is stamp duty? A lot of you have probably heard of it, but most people don't actually know exactly what it means. So duty is just another word for tax. So stamp duty is a tax that buyers pay when they purchase a property. So it differs from state to state and is a sliding scale depending on the purchase price of the property. This concession will allow you to pay zero stamp duty or possibly a reduced amount depending on the value of the property. So in Queensland, for example, stamp duty on a $700,000 property is $17,350. So not having to pay that as a cost can go a long way to getting you into your home sooner. So in terms of the criteria, you have to be buying the property as an individual or as individuals with other borrowers and be at least 18 years old. So if you wanted to buy in a trust or a company, you wouldn't qualify for this. You have to be buying it yourself. The property being purchased has to be under $700,000 for you to get the full stamp duty concession. Or if it's between $700,000 and $8,000, you'll get a partial concession. If you're buying or building a brand new property, then there is no price limit. So just to make that clear, if you were to buy land for $2 million and build yourself a $2 million house and you're a first home buyer in Queensland, you would not have to pay any stamp duty. So if you're a first home buyer who's probably looking a little bit above the other scheme limits, you might still be eligible for the stamp duty concession if you're willing to buy brand new or build your property. To be eligible, you must have never owned residential property in Australia or overseas. However, stamp duty is actually calculated individually for each buyer. So if you're a first home buyer, but you're buying with someone else who's previously owned property, you can still get this concession, but the other person will not get the concession. So you will still get potentially some benefit from this scheme. You have to be planning to live in the property yourself and move in within 12 months of the purchase, and you must live there for at least 12 months. So no saying you're going to do this and then sticking renters in. I actually have had clients before who have told me they didn't wait the full 12 months, they stuck some renters in, and trust me, the government will find out and they will ask for that stamp duty concession back. So if the property is valued between $700,000 and $800,000, you must be paying market value. So essentially, this is to stop family members selling property between themselves for a reduced rate in order to get out of stamp duty. You must not dispose of, which means sell, transfer, or lease any or all of the property before you move in. If a lease is already in place when you buy, the tenants can stay there for up to 6 months before you move in. But you couldn't buy a place, rent it out for a couple of months, then move in. You got to move in first. Now, despite the above criteria, new rules mean you can rent a room. So you can't lease out the entire property, but let's say you're single and you move into a 2-bedroom apartment and you want to rent the second bedroom, you are allowed to do that, whereas previously you were not. That's recently changed. So this is a really handy concession that can save you a bit of cash. Now onto the first home owner grant. So again, this is exclusive to Queensland. Some of the other states do have first homeowner grants, but the criteria are different. But if you want to set up a meeting with me, we can go over the relevant schemes in your state. So this grant provides $30,000 to first home buyers who are purchasing a brand new residence or constructing a new residence. As I said, the following information only covers the scheme in Queensland. Now, one thing to keep in mind with the first homeowner grant is, depending on which lender you go to, it will be treated differently. So some lenders will not take this grant into account, and you can just get paid in cash by the government later. So 30 grand in cash just landing in your bank account does sound pretty good, but probably a better way to do it if you need the deposit is some lenders will actually count this as part of your deposit. So they will say, hey, we're just going to pretend that you've already given us that 30 grand from the government because we know we'll get paid it later. And then that gets you towards your required deposit amount so much faster. So that's something that I regularly do with clients. That's been really helpful. So for the criteria, any co-applicant and your spouse must have never received a first homeowner grant in any state or territory in Australia. So if you are buying with your spouse, you both can't have received it. If you're buying with someone else, say your sister or brother, but your spouse has previously received a first homeowner grant, that also disqualifies you. So it's not just your co-applicant, it's also your spouse, even if they're not buying with you. You have to be an Australian citizen or permanent resident and at least 18 years of age. Any co-applicant and your spouse, again, that's your spouse, even if they're not an applicant with you, must not have owned property that you lived in after the 1st of July 2000 or owned any property at all prior to 1 July 2000. So if you owned an investment property after 1 July 2000, but you never lived in a property you owned, you will potentially still be eligible for this scheme. So the next criteria is the total value of the final residence, which is the land and the property, must be worth less than $750,000. So there are still places out there that you can do this. If you're looking in central Brisbane, you might have a bit of trouble finding a brand new property for under $750,000. But I've had clients just recently who have gone a bit further out and they've managed to get land and build for under $750,000 and then qualify for the grant. So there's definitely options depending on what you're looking for. You have to be planning to live in the property and move in within 12 months of the purchase and live there continuously for at least 6 months. Now, if you're building and it's not finished within 12 months, that's okay. You don't have to move into the half-built house. There are more criteria about when it's finished, but essentially you have to move in as soon as it's finished. And the final one, you have to be purchasing a brand new residence that's never been lived in. You have to, or constructing a brand new residence, or under some circumstances, buying a substantially renovated residence. So I won't go into too much detail about that, but the substantially renovated residence part is a bit more complicated than it sounds. You can't buy a place and then make a few changes and say, hey, it's renovated, we're moving in. It is a bit more complicated than that. I won't go into it now, but if that's something you're interested in, set up a meeting with us and we'll go from there. So that pretty much covers off everything I have to say about first home buying from a finance perspective. We'll just switch over to Nathan, and I think we'll answer a question or two while we're moving that over.
Excellent. Mitch, I wanted to ask, so with that government help to buy scheme, what sort of rate do you have to pay that back at?
So under the help to buy scheme, in terms of paying it back, as I said, you don't pay it back altogether. The government owns a certain portion, and the different options are, one, if you sell, the government will take their portion back straight away. So you're not necessarily borrowing money to pay that back. The government will just take it from the sale proceeds. If you are not planning to sell it, but your income goes up to the point where you are able to buy some of it back, the government will look at your overall circumstances to see what that needs to be. So my general recommendation would be, let's say you're at a certain bank, you've borrowed the other 70% from them, and the government has their 30%, and you're buying back, say, 10% or a third of the government's share. You would just add that to your loan at your existing bank, and they would pay the government back. So it would be the same rate that you're looking at now. If you get to a point where you can actually refinance the whole thing and pay the government completely back, you can go to whichever lender you like. So it really depends on what the going rate is at the time, but it's going to be the same as a standard home loan. It's not going to be a special loan that charges you a higher rate or anything like that.
Cool. Thanks, Mitch. And obviously you talked about a few different schemes and initiatives that are on offer. I guess what's the sort of pros and cons of like maybe a parental guarantor versus other government schemes?
Sure. So for my first home buyers, if you qualify for the government schemes, I would usually recommend going with them because it means you don't have to get your parents involved. You don't have to potentially put their property at risk. They don't have to pay to get legal advice and a few other hoops to jump through for the guarantee. So if you can use the government scheme, that would generally be what I recommend. But A parental guarantee is a bit more flexible. So one, the government schemes are only for you to live in. If you don't want to live in this property, you want to buy maybe a cheaper investment property as your first property, you can do that under a family guarantee. You can't do that under the government schemes. Also, under the government schemes, you need at least that 2% or 5% deposit plus costs. If you use a family guarantee, you can potentially do that with zero savings whatsoever. So it essentially can allow you to get in a bit faster if you don't have that deposit ready to go. So the biggest benefit of a parental guarantee is it's a bit more flexible in terms of what you can do with it.
Awesome. Thank you. Great. I think we'll jump into my presentation now, again, conscious of time, and then we'll sort of loop back at the end and ask a few more questions.
Beautiful.
So again, thank you, everyone. My name is Nathan. I'm from Property Perspective Queensland Buyers Agency and property strategist. Thanks again for attending today's session. I wanted to commend all of you firstly for taking this step, arming yourself with the correct knowledge and information to help you on your property journey. Property's really been a key driver for me in terms of building wealth for myself and my family, and it's really exciting for you to be starting your own journey in that regard. The objective here is to run through things from a technical perspective when we're looking at and assessing property from a buyer's agency perspective, and hopefully you'll take a few things that you can then utilize in your own property searches. We do also have a YouTube channel where I go through these 10 fundamentals in a lot more detail. So I recommend that you check that out if you want to go into that level of detail. So first off is location and gentrification. So at Property Perspective, we tend to preference property that are closer into the CBD. These are locations which we find are more highly desirable in the market. They generally got higher demand, better infrastructure, closer amenities, and better transport connectivity. And people want convenience. And at the end of the day, they're willing to pay for it. So when the market goes down, what we find is those properties that are on the peripheral, on the outer rim, those are the ones that actually suffer the most and get hit the mostly impacted. So when we're looking at things, what are we sort of looking for? So first is proximity to lifestyle drivers. Think about cinemas, restaurants, shopping centres. Those are things that people want to be reasonably close to. The other thing is demographic change. So if you're noticing in a suburb that there's more younger professionals coming in, that can be a bit of an indication of things are on the move. Next is renovation and building activity. So again, if you're starting to see houses get knocked down or a lot of construction happening, that could be a really good indication of gentrification happening in that suburb. And next is infrastructure and investment. So government, big corporations, when they've got a big project, they're generally going to announce that. So again, really important to keep on the news cycle to see where these hotspots could be coming next. And then finally is price relativity. So obviously in the inner rim, there are going to be certain suburbs that are preferenced over others. But and sometimes those prices could maybe be beyond what you're willing to or able to afford. But what we recommend is, look at next door suburbs that might still have similar sort of fundamentals, but at the end of the day, you could be getting them at a discounted price, and there could be a real window of opportunity. There is a website here I've put up on the slide deck, so landchecker.com.au. We check this website regularly to look at all of that key metrics when we're assessing the property. The next is local income profile. So ultimately, income drives affordability, which then in turn affects prices and rental demand. So what do we mean by this? So we're looking at the average and median household income for that particular suburb. It gives you a really good indication of the profitability and economic strength of that particular suburb to potentially be able to afford future growth and support that growth. So why does it matter? Well, higher income households can borrow more, they can spend more, they've got more money in reserve, and ultimately that can really push property prices up. On the rental side of things, more stability. You've probably got tenants with stronger incomes, less likely to default or break lease, and they can also absorb some of those rental increases over time. We also look at income diversity. So you want to try to avoid areas where there could be a particular industry or employment type, they can tend to be a lot more vulnerable to economic shifts. So again, keeping that in mind. And there's this website, sqmresearch.com.au, which again, we use to look at all of those demographics pretty much daily. Next is distance and livability. So this is how close in proximity that you're looking at when you're looking at deterrence for future buyers. So depending on where you live, there could be major highways, there could be cut-through streets, proximity to the airport, railway lines, high traffic infrastructure. It's about finding a balance between convenience and lifestyle compromise. So what are we assessing? So on this particular page, you can see there noise impact. So constant background noise can really affect day-to-day living. Walkability versus exposure trade-off. So you could be close enough to walk to the shops, but then you've got a lot of foot traffic. So again, how much are you willing to compromise there? Next is future resale appeal. So if you're thinking about when you're buying a property, what the future market might be expecting of that particular area in the next 10 to 20 years. And ultimately, it's about perceived livability. So you want to try to avoid any deterrence that could affect your future buyer market. Again, cityplan.brisbane.qld.gov.au is a website that we regularly check to look at particularly noise deterrence. Next is flood risk assessment. So again, we're trying to avoid these spots that could reduce the market there. And there's three types of floods. So you've got river flooding, which is your sort of 1 in 10 year, 1 in 20 year, seem to be happening more often these days, those types of events. Then you've got creek, which is usually more localized to those properties in close proximity to those waterways. And then finally is overland flow, which is probably a little bit more misunderstood, but it's something that you need to be aware of because every storm season or every big rain event, your property could be really impacted by that. So whenever you're looking at the block, really important to check the slope, look at where the property is sitting relative to the street level and where that runoff could come. And in Queensland particularly, this is a very real consideration when it comes to assessing property. After every major flood event, it could take literally decades for things to shift. Personally, my mother had a apartment in St. Lucia, and after the floods in 2011, it took a good 6 months for the property to actually get fixed because there was so much backlog because so much of the area was affected. And then she was trying to let go of that property over the next 10 years. And really the price laid stagnant for that entire period. And ultimately she actually let it go at a bit of a loss. So really important to consider that. Big flooding events can have a major impact on your value. I touched on it, but yeah, insurance, lending appetite, and resale value can obviously get impacted as well. So really important to check the website. I've got cityplan.brisbane.qld.gov.au, and there's also a flood map, which is looking at different data points as well. Next is land to asset ratio. So in other words, how much are we paying for the land versus the structure sitting on top of it? But why does this matter? Well, ultimately, land is actually what appreciates on a property, and your building is actually what depreciates over time. If you think about it, it requires a lot more maintenance. It will require a capital for any renovation, and eventually, if it gets old enough, you might actually have to replace the building entirely. So high land to asset ratio is where the land makes up the majority of it. As buyer's agents, we're really trying to target 70, 80, 90% of the purchase price being the land. If you can achieve that, that is a phenomenal result. So for a house, if we're looking at inner city, these, again, depends on the block, but you're generally trying to target properties that are maybe 400 square meters, 600 square meters as a minimum. Obviously, if you can find something at 800 square meters that you could potentially subdivide down the track, that could give you a lot more flexibility. And as you go further out, you just want those blocks to be bigger, so probably starting more at the 600 square meter mark around the middle ring and beyond. For an apartment block, this would be a smaller complex. So we generally look at 2 packs, 4 packs, and 6 packs. And what that means, essentially, in a unit block, there would be 6 units is a 6 pack. So say you're buying a portion of that. If you bought one, then you obviously get 1/6 of the land. So that's how that works. With lower land to asset ratio, think about your newer builds. So this could be your high-rise apartment blocks with hundreds of the same unit put into the complex. When you look at that, the prices, a lot of it can be made up of the construction costs, the amenities, and then developer margins. And there's not a lot of uniqueness or scarcity when it comes to that. So they just don't perform to the same level as where you've got something that's got a higher land to asset ratio. Other factors that we look at are scarcity. So obviously the land becomes more valuable over time. This could be due to subdivision potential, zoning changes, increase in density, or tightening supply in a high demand suburb. And there is this website again, so www.qld.gov.au/environment, land and title. So of course you can Google it, but that's where we go to look at what land values are worth from a government perspective and then calculate your costs. Essentially, if you can acquire a property below what it's going to cost you to replace, you're doing very well. Next is floor plan and configuration. Now, most people look at bedrooms, bathrooms, car spaces, and then the land size. But obviously, two properties with the same specs don't always perform the same way. And a lot of that can be based off the floor plan. So if we look at layout efficiency, how well the space is used, how big it is, a more efficient layout will generally feel better and be more desirable to both buyers and tenants. It's a bonus if you can look at a space and transform it into something that adds value without compromising livability. So other key things that we look at is natural light, ventilation, access to outdoor areas. Is there future flexibility? Can this floor plan be adapted or transformed over time? Remember, buyers that purchase, when they go through the property, it's how they feel about it that really gives you that emotional response, which then could drive prices higher. When we look at this particular example, so this is a townhouse that we bought recently in Maruka. You can see here the outdoor areas, really big, exclusive access, so really good in terms of functionality there. And if you look inside, if you're looking at a bedroom, anything over 3 by 3 meters is quite large. So you can see there the main bedroom and bedroom 2, really oversized. You've also got a balcony at the front, which is again oversized. Downstairs, you've got a laundry there, which is again quite big. You could potentially extend the kitchen there, gives you different options, and you've got a massive living area. And then if you look at that green square in the top right-hand side, you can see there's a walk-in cupboard and an ensuite. And so for this, it's a 2-bed, 2-bath, obviously quite big. But if you wanted to create some instant equity, you could actually convert that space into an additional bedroom. So now you've got a 3-bed, 1-bath in that area, would actually do really well in terms of price, but also rent. Next is value add potential. So this is one of the most powerful strategies to build wealth through property, and we use it to manufacture equity and accelerate the growth of the asset. So we look at what you can do to unlock the potential with the right type of improvement. And this is where we can create value, not by waiting for the market to rise, by actually making the improvement and activating that property itself. If you can do that combined with buying under market price, buying a strong asset with the right sort of fundamentals, and then you add on top of that market growth, it's just one of the best asset classes to really invest in. So what does this actually look like? So the easiest things to do are cosmetic uplifts. Think about paint, flooring, fixtures, lighting, those sorts of things, new cupboards, bench tops, pretty minimal spend or technicality in terms of you're not moving things structurally, but can make a really big impact on how people feel when they walk through the door. The next is the reconfiguration of the space itself. So this is where things can be a little bit more strategic, where you move walls or create new ones, creating a new room, opening up areas for better light or better flow of the floor plan. And that's where we can really significantly increase both rental return and resale value. Third is underutilized space conversion. So this is where we could be looking at converting a garage into a multi-purpose area, a storage area into maybe a home office, or looking at a redundant dining area and turning it into a new bedroom. So the value is sitting there in plain sight. It's just about seeing it and then unlocking it. Having said all this, you should never renovate just for the sake of it. There's such thing as overcapitalizing on these types of projects, but you really want to target improvements that the market will actually pay a premium for. Any improvements cannot compromise livability or functionality, otherwise you're just going to make the property more or less desirable. So again, looking at this value add potential, and this is for a client that we did last year. That living and dining area, again, very big. Because you've got the dual balconies, you're not compromising one of those, both balconies. And there was enough space there to put a third bedroom or multi-purpose area. So again, turning a 2-bed into a 3-bed, instant equity uplift and better rentability. Next is age and condition. So as a general rule, as buyer's agents, we typically like to target older style properties, and there's a few reasons for that. Firstly, you've got a lot of historical data. So if you look at the history of it, you can see how much maintenance the property has had over the years through your strata searches. You can also look at how that property has actually performed through different downturns and upticks. Secondly, we try to avoid new build premiums traps. So this is often where new builds come with a premium price built into it. Think about your developer margins, marketing costs, construction overheads. The challenging part is that these builds don't always translate to equivalent market value once the property is actually settled. And the property is ultimately at what we call highest and best use. So there's nothing that you can really do to improve the property. You're really waiting on the market to do the heavy lifting, and you're waiting on next door neighbour sales to actually improve the price or potentially or the other way. In this day, land is obviously scarce, so developers are looking to maximize their profit. They're trying to put as many dwellings as they can onto a particular block of land, and what you end up with is smaller rooms, smaller spaces, but they're obviously trying to maximize their profit. Established properties often sit in better locations as well. They've got more infrastructure, amenities, superior in terms of quality and build with a lot of these older styles, and that results in attracting consistent buyer demand. So the core principle that we're really trying to teach here is don't avoid age or something that doesn't necessarily present that well. Try to avoid overpaying for marketing appeal. When you think about what sales agents are trying to do, they're trying to present it as best as possible to get the highest price. And often it's those properties that don't present particularly well. Maybe they're under rented. They're often the ones that you can actually get the best deals on if you can do your due diligence and make sure you understand the risk. Next is external space. So sometimes this gets treated as a little bit of an afterthought, but particularly in Queensland or cities where you've got strong outdoor appeal and lifestyle, they're really important. So firstly, we assess how usable the space is. The yard or outdoor area, is it functional, flat, usable, or is it steep and awkward? Often a smaller yard that's functional is going to outperform a larger one that just isn't usable. Secondly is privacy and aspect. So outdoor livability is heavily influenced around what surrounds the space. If you think about your neighbours, if they got direct line of sight into your bedroom, obviously that's not going to be ideal. Looking at sunlight exposure throughout the day, wind or noise exposure, these all impact livability. Third is functionality of modern living. So looking at high demand areas with entertaining options, outdoor living, space for the kids or pets. Often people want to work outside, so that work from home flexibility is something that they're looking for as well. Lastly is that future enhancement potential. So could you add a deck or a patio? Could you transform a garage space? Could you do a bit of landscaping to improve usability? Does installing a fence create more privacy or even exclusive access or use? Those are the sorts of things that we're looking for. Often relatively modest upgrades can actually dramatically increase the perceived value of that particular property. So external space is not just a nice to have, it can greatly amplify value on a property. Again, looking at these examples I've got on the slide, this massive oversized balcony wrap around the living and bedroom area. And then again, looking at this garage, it was so big you could fit a storeroom in there. So those are the types of things that we're looking for that stand out. Lastly is what we call key variables. So they can quietly make or break a property, but it's something that you need to keep in mind. So slope of the block, this can really impact things from a usability perspective, particularly if you're looking at construction or development down the track. Yes, steeper blocks can often give you unique views or aspects, but they come with the trade-off of practical and financial impacts that you have to consider. The next is zoning. So this determines essentially what you can or cannot do on a block. It includes renovations, extensions, potential subdivisions, broader development upside. So understanding the zoning of a particular area really gives you an idea around if this is a property that you're going to be holding as is, or if it has future potential. Third is body corporate or strata fees, obviously where applicable. So for units, townhouses, some complex developments, they're going to be ongoing costs that can have an impact on cash flow as well as resale appeal. And again, it's something to keep in mind. And then other hidden variables that often get overlooked include easements or encumbrances on a particular title, environmental constraints, access issues or shared driveways, particularly like battle axe blocks, or even future infrastructure nearby. So, you know, is next door going to be installing a new retirement village, or is it going to be a nice open park? So both come with pros and cons. Finally, is something that we call X factor. So elements around the property that cannot be replicated and make them really stand out. So things about, you know, the aspect, the street appeal, how scarce a particular type of dwelling is in that area, how large the rooms are. These are things that cannot be replicated in other properties, and is something that we're always trying to look for as buyer's agents. So just to wrap up, we've obviously heard from Mitch around the finance side of things. Really good that you know, we've been able to run through a lot of those tips and tricks. Really important that you obviously obtain pre-approval, talk to your mortgage broker, figure out what you're comfortable in terms of repayment wise. I know that was something that I experienced, particularly when I first started out. Mitch touched on it slightly before, but you're owning entities. So yes, you can obviously buy things in your own name, but sometimes there can be key benefits to putting it either through a trust or a different structure. So talk to your accountant or financial planner. Do your research, make sure that you set up your criteria, what is essential versus what you're potentially willing to compromise, and really understand the process. I see it so many times in chat groups where people are like, oh my God, I put a contract down on something, what do I do now? So really understand each step of the process. Something else we try to do as buyer's agents, and what if you've got a good buyer's agent, they should be doing all the time, is sourcing pre or off market opportunities. You're trying to avoid competition. Competition drives price. So if you can secure something off market or pre-market, there's always a benefit there. Build relationships with those agents in those key areas that you're really looking to target. Be memorable, but for the right reasons. And be prepared to move quickly. So as buyer's agents, we are always trying to do deals during the week. Again, if you leave it until the weekend, you're going to be looking through a property with everybody else, and that means more competition. There's also trying to negotiate on a property, different levers that you can pull. So yes, price, people obviously focus on that a lot, but what we do as buyer's agents is really try to make it sharp with our conditions. And often you'll be so surprised how many times that a contract will get accepted where they've got much better conditions in terms of finance clause or building and pest, and that can make the difference, even if it's, you know, another offer's on the table with more money. Don't get emotionally compromised. So yes, you'll see lots of property and you'll fall in love with things, but the worst thing you can do is really overpay for that. So as good as the property might be, don't get too attached. And lastly, obviously do your research. Partner with a buyer's agent. Reach out to us. Talk to your experts. You know, be that mortgage brokers, be that buyer's agents. Arm yourself with as much knowledge as you can. So then you are walking into these sorts of situations with confidence, and we can obviously help you through that. Have your checklist ready to go so you don't miss any of those key fundamentals. And like I said, we have our YouTube page, so please visit that if you'd like to go into the fundamentals in a lot more detail. just very quickly, if you did want to partner with us and leverage our decades worth of experience in property, from initial consultation, which everybody on this call is entitled to, absolutely free and at no obligation, all the way through negotiation, purchase, and beyond. As part of our service, and something that's a little bit of a point of difference with Property Perspective Queensland is, obviously we do the buyer's agency side of things, but with those cosmetic uplifts that I was talking about, where you can really add value or unlock value, that's actually part of our service when it comes to coordination of those cosmetic uplifts. Again, please utilize that. And finally, as for first home buyers, remember that you're just really getting started. Your first home doesn't need to be a forever home, but it does, in my opinion, need to be a smart decision and a smart step. So if you're buying a property with strong fundamentals in the right location, you're not just purchasing a place to live, you're really setting yourself up financially with a really strong foundation to build future wealth. I bought my first property 20 years ago, a small one-bedroom apartment in West End. It was all I could afford. I was living on noodles and tuna for the first 6 months, but it was my first step in the door. And without it, it wouldn't have got me to where I am now, where I feel very financially secure. So thank you again for your time. Please reach out if we can help you on your property journey. And we'll now transition to some Q&A. So bear with me. And I've also got Nick Marini, so he's my business partner and founder of Property Perspective Queensland, joining alongside us with Mitch from SW. So first one's, I think, for you, Mitch. How much do credit cards, Afterpay, or car loans affect your borrowing capacity?
Short answer is it depends, but a lot, potentially. So credit cards, banks will assume that you have maxed it out. So let's say you have a credit card with a $10,000 limit, but you only ever put $1,000 on it and you pay it off every month. Bank doesn't care. They assume that it's maxed out at $10,000 and look at what the repayments would be if you did that. Because in theory, any day you could just go out and max it out, and that's what you'd be responsible for. So can drop you down a fair bit. Car loans tend to be worse than credit cards. So unless you have a really big credit card, it's probably not going to be hundreds of thousands. But if you have a huge car loan and you're paying $2,000 a fortnight or something ridiculous like that, that is going to massively impact your borrowing power. It depends on your individual circumstances, but that's kind of how it goes. In terms of Afterpay, that's something that in the past kind of skidded by, but recently we're seeing a lot of banks looking a lot more closely at Afterpay. That's one that is usually not as bad, but it's just something that the banks will look at what kind of your average repayment is looking like and go from there. So, it depends on your individual circumstances, but those can potentially make a fair bit of difference. And we can even look at what are your best options for getting rid of those and if you need to.
Mm-hmm. Very good. The next one I might throw to you, Nick. So the question is, should I buy something I love or something that will perform better financially?
Oh, that's a good question. Definitely something that will perform, obviously, over time. You got to make the first one really count, because if you do get it right on the first one, it can really take you quite far in the property journey. But if you do fall in love with it and you pay emotionally and you get the fundamentals wrong, it could really become a roadblock for your future property journey.
Absolutely. Thank you. Back to you, Mitch. Does a higher deposit mean I will get a lower interest rate? Is there anything I can do to get a lower rate?
The answer to that is maybe. So there are certainly lenders that have different rates for different tiers. So if you need to borrow 80% of the property value versus 70% versus 60%, they will offer you different rates between those. It's not going to be massive, as in you're not dropping down 0.5% because you had a bit more of a deposit. But yeah, generally, the bigger your deposit, you may be able to get a slightly better rate. The best thing about, I suppose, having a bigger deposit is it gives you more options of lenders, and then you might be able to access lenders who can offer you potentially the much lower rates, which tend to be the more conservative lenders who won't lend as much, and that's how they can afford to give you the cheap rates. So it never hurts to have more of a big deposit, But in saying that, we look over your circumstances and your future goals, because it may be that even if you could put down a 50% deposit, maybe that doesn't actually align with what you want to do. Maybe you just think, hey, no, I'm just going to put down 20% or 30% and I'm going to do something else with that 20%, like put it towards a potential investment property purchase or put it towards shares. So your overall position and the best way to structure your lending is something that we'll look at on an individual level.
Yep, awesome. Thank you. Back to you, Nick. What do you? What are some of the biggest mistakes that you see first home buyers make when buying property?
Well, I guess it goes back to that original question. Sorry. I guess it goes back to that original first question. It's I see too many first home buyers getting caught up from an emotional point of view and actually buying properties that they obviously like the look of, and obviously in areas where they are probably feeling more safe from a quality perspective, rather than actually buying properties that will perform better from a capital growth perspective.
Awesome. Mitch, should I get pre-approval before I start attending open homes?
The answer to that, I would say, is yes and no. If you want to start looking right now, there's certainly no problem with that. And lots of people will make offers and have contracts accepted without a pre-approval. But there's really no reason not to at least explore it. So if you set up a meeting with me, we can have a chat and say, oh, is a pre-approval going to be something that you want to do? For those that don't know, a pre-approval essentially is before you found a property, you make an application to a bank to borrow a certain amount. They'll look at your income, your expenses, your liabilities, and the amount of money that you're trying to borrow and the potential purchase price you're looking at, and say, hey, look, we know you haven't found a property yet, but based on all this information you've given us, we would be willing to lend you X amount if you find a property we're happy with. So it never hurts to get a pre-approval, but I wouldn't say don't even start looking because you don't have one. It never hurts to get a bit of education. So long story short, come and chat to me as soon as possible, but also have a look around. There's no harm in it.
Absolutely. Nick, I've got a question here. I've heard that land is what I should be trying to buy. Should I be prioritizing to save up until I can afford a house and land?
No, definitely not. Look, I think obviously it really depends on price point where you sit, but I think it's about getting in the market in areas that will perform well. Units and townhouses, especially in the last few years, have outperformed the housing market as well. So again, it's about buying the right properties that will perform well with the right, property selection method or process, using the fundamentals that you went through obviously in the conversation today are obviously very important. But yeah, look, I think the old view of land, whilst it's still applicable in many cases, I think it's not only the only way to actually buy quality property right now.
Yeah, I think we've talked about it before, right? Where I think time in market beats timing the market, and the longer you're sitting on the sidelines trying to save up, you could be missing out, and it could even be harder. The next question sort of applies to that, Mitch. How long does pre-approval last?
So that can vary bank to bank. The general answer is 90 days. Some lenders will do 120 days. And some lenders, if your pre-approval does run out, all they need is basically 2 new pay slips if you're an employee, and they'll say, hey, we can renew this for another 90 or 120 days. So if you know you're definitely not going to be looking in the next 90 days, don't bother. But if you think there might be something, give it a crack. And if it expires, you can get another one.
Excellent. Thanks, Mitch. Back to you, Nick. What advice would you give your younger self when it comes to getting into property?
Well, look, I was quite lucky. I did get in quite young when I was 20, but I think there's a few things that I would have done differently as well. It probably starts with knowledge, to be honest. It's probably making sure that you are making the best informed decision you can, and actually taking advice from people that have been there and done it as well. So I think far too many people these days rely on family and friends for their advice, which, look, it's all well intended, but I think actually going out there and actually paying for some quality advice, be it through a mortgage broker, accountant, solicitor, or buyer's agent, is quite important. So buyer's agents were probably not what they are now 20 years ago when I got in the market, but I think I'd be probably trying to learn as much as I can from the people that have actually been in your shoes.
Excellent. Mitch, is there a limit to the length of a finance clause?
No. I mean, you could make the finance clause 2,000 days if you wanted to, but no seller is ever going to accept that.
Yep.
Before the last few years, I would say the standard finance clause was 14 days and 7 days was a short one. Because the market has been so hot the last few years, 7 days has kind of become the standard. You occasionally get finance clauses over 7 days, but I would say anything over 7 days and you're risking a seller saying, no, that's too long for us. So my general recommendation would be go for 7 days unless there's a crucial reason why you couldn't. But yeah, there's nothing stopping you from offering longer than that, but you certainly risk sellers not being interested.
Yep, no, absolutely. We see that as well as buyers agents.
I think the sharper your conditions can be, obviously if you can get pre-approval or if you can do an unconditional contract or clause, that is often a lot stronger than anybody with any caveats. I'll stick with you, Mitch. If I wanted to buy something in the next 6 months, what should I be doing from tomorrow?
I mean, that depends on your circumstances, I suppose. Things that I would certainly keep in mind as general advice. One, have your deposit saved in a separate bank account. So it just makes things easier. If you have a bank, some banks don't care, but a lot of banks do want to actually see, okay, where's your deposit? Where's that money come from? If you have that all mixed into your general spending, they're going to be looking at every single transaction you've made. Not that we want to hide anything, but you might have things in there that you don't necessarily want a banker to be looking over and asking you questions about. If they look and they see, oh, well, this much at the sports bar, this much on gambling, that kind of thing, they're going to ask some questions. So I would say keep your deposit in a separate account just so you can keep things as clean as possible. If you do have existing loans, credit cards, even a HEX debt, consider, is that something that I can potentially get rid of? That's something you can speak to me about and see if that's something we can look at. If you do have existing loans as well, don't miss any repayments. If you have any missed repayments on any kind of lending in the last 6 months, a lot of banks will say, no, not interested. If you can't stay on top of your credit card, how are we going to lend you $500,000 to buy a house? Those are probably the 3 biggest things I would say apply to pretty much everyone. But on an individual level, have a chat to us and we'll go over what's best for you.
Excellent. Nick, from a buyer's agent perspective, if somebody was looking to buy in the next 6 months, what do you think they should be doing?
Well, look, definitely speak to the team and get your finance sorted out. Obviously, that's number one. But the other thing is, it goes back to what I was saying before, is making sure that you are looking, even if you are not going to engage a buyer's agent, speak to a few buyer's agents out there, see what level of service they can offer you. Try and get as much information out there. Educate yourself. That's probably the first step that I would take.
Absolutely.
Conscious of time, so I'll probably leave this one as the last question, but maybe to yourself, Nick, what is the biggest mistake you see buyers make once they get emotionally attached to a property?
Just pay too much. Look, for me, again, as a first-time buyer, I think controlling what you are spending is paramount. Making sure that you are ticking all the boxes of your needs, but also making sure that the property is a financial decision and not an emotional decision. It's important as well. So I think just obviously go about it with the right mindset, but take the advice.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you'd be surprised how many people who are experts in property and real estate are willing to help people if you just come at it genuinely and ask the right questions. I think that's all we really have time for. Any other parting comments from the team here?
I mean, I was just going to say, look, thank you everyone for joining us. And the first thing you want to do from here is get in contact with us. If you're a first home buyer and you have no idea what you're doing, you don't know your situation, you don't know what you can borrow, you don't even know what kind of property you're looking for, you can meet with any of us. We're not going to charge you any money. Have a chat to us. And worst case scenario is you spend 5 and 10 minutes and then realize you're not ready to do something. But you might be closer than you think. So have a chat to us and we'll have a look at your situation and see what you can do from there. So, please reach out.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks everyone again for joining. Again, commend everybody online for taking the first step. I think it's really important to educate, get yourself armed with all the knowledge you can, so it helps you make better informed decisions. So thanks everyone for your time tonight. Thank you both Mitch and Nick for your inputs, and we'll hopefully all see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you. See you later.